Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today I am with my fellow podcaster friend Isaiah Lafone, and we're going to be talking about Pride Month in general and all the different subjects that it's good for a Christian to talk about so we can learn more about this month and how we can combat it with kindness and goodness and love and be able to discipline yourself as a Christian to stay away from it and help people get closer to Christ by it, and also someday hopefully help people see the wrongs in their ways and help them on the path of repentance to fall away from this sick religion and go back to Christ for help and support. We're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects within Pride Month, so be sure to give it a listen. Thank you so much for all the support I've had so far on the podcast. Don't forget to give it a like and a follow if you haven't already, either on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast, anywhere that you're listening. So without further ado, welcome back to another episode of Lift High the Cross podcast. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, Isaiah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on. It was good. It was good. Really good having you on. Going to your podcast and having a good conversation about Lutheranism. And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different from Christian doctrine. We're going to be talking about Pride Month, the LGBT community, a lot of the messed up things that are going on in society. Not only our modern culture has really taken a liking to it, but also some parts of the church that are trying to push that into Christianity, which is a no-no. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. So Isaiah, thank you so much for coming on. Also, you haven't been on my show before, so please introduce yourself. You can call out your podcast if you want and tell everyone who you are.
Yes, thank you so much. I am so pleased to be on today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not know me, a lot of you might not. My name is Isaiah Presley Lafone, and I am a Reformed Reconquistador, very similar to Richard Ackerman, Redeemed Zoomer. I'm a PCUSA member, and I am currently attending college at Boyce College, the college at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, in which I will I'm doing the seminary track, the 5-year seminary track, so I will be graduating in 5 years with my bachelor's and master's of divinity. I plan to go into the pastorate and hopefully later on academia, as it seems to be where my strengths are best suited.
Fantastic. So what we're going to talk about today is all the different things that are going on in June, and it's all everywhere. It's really hard not to avoid all the stuff that's been going on, especially through X. So to start off the episode, I think it'd be good to kind of talk about kind of either if it was in your high school years or younger years, or for me, it was during 2020, 2021, when I started to notice all of this LGBT pride was going on, and it was starting to make a big impact on a lot of people's lives during Joe Biden's presidency, and especially taking a big hit on lots of younger people, specifically our generation and the younger generation before us, Alpha. So I wanted to ask you, when you, what year or what part of your life when you started noticing this becoming a big issue? Obviously, for the last 20, 30 years, it has been becoming a big issue because more and more people are starting to be okay with it. People are starting to make it more normal. But when did this started to become such a big problem from your point of view?
Yes. So personally, and this goes into a little bit of my backstory a little bit here. I grew up in a very politically active home, much more politically active than theologically active. Right. So I was born into a Southern Baptist context, and I just learned the other day that the other week that the pastor that I grew up under was never dispensationalist. He was never memorialist or any of that. He was very reformed in his thinking and theology, as reformed as a Baptist can be, of course. But my grandmother, who taught me the faith, and she taught me the faith very well, very well. So this isn't a knock on her. I love my grandmother, but she was dispensationalist and rapture theology believing, and so that's kind of what I grew up with. Grew up in that context and watched every Left Behind film. So my family was very much more politically active than it was theologically active. And so I always kind of understood that this was an issue going on. The first taste of it I got was in 2015, and I was 8 years old. And I remember two instances that I'll speak of. The first was seeing the White House lit up in the rainbow colors after the decision from the Supreme Court was handed down. I think that was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And then another instance, same thing in 2015. It was the day before I was supposed to leave on a mission trip, and I remember seeing. I was downstairs in my home. We had a finished basement then, and I was writing something. I was always writing something as a child. I was always, this was what I was born to do. I was born to be an intellectual person. So I was always writing something. So I was writing something that I had learned in Sunday school. And I remember the TV was playing in the background for where my sisters had been watching a TV show on the Disney Junior channel. And I remember an episode of this particular show in 2015 on the Disney Junior channel, the channel specifically geared towards young children. I remember there was an episode where the characters were taking care of one character, a child character in the show, and they were giving the child back and to the parents after taking care of the child. And they explicitly said, "Oh, there's your mom's," with an S there at the end. And the child asked something. I can't remember exactly the context. And they really drove the point home because there was this dinosaur character that the child wanted to ride on. And he said, "Only if it's okay with your two moms." Like, you're really driving the point home there. And when I heard that, I ran and I told my grandmother. And I was like, "You will not believe what is on the television downstairs. What was on the Disney Junior show." So that was my first, when I really kind of understood that this was, I was 8 years old. So that's when I was really introduced to it. And I always knew kind of, even at 8 years old, that something must be wrong about this. So something isn't right here. Right? Because I mean, I had always, grown up seeing, I understood that you need a father and a mother. You can't work with two fathers or two mothers. Something seemed off about it. Then as I got older, I began, rejecting the faith in around the time of middle school that I was brought up in, because I did not have a good relationship with my father. And so that caused me to act out and be a bit of a hooligan. And when I was in middle school, I became a little bit more accepting of it. I remember one time specifically, a good friend of mine, a female, and she asked me, because I had said that I was a Christian. I wasn't a Christian. I was just kind of, presenting. And she asked me, as a Christian, what I thought of homosexuality. And I really regret my remarks there, because that was a great opportunity right there to share the gospel. Now, I wasn't touched by the gospel, so I give myself a little bit of grace. But I responded by saying, I used to be against it, but you know what? If that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. Go ahead and live, kind of live and let live mindset, libertarian kind of mindset. So I really regret that. It wasn't until after I was regenerated and I was saved that I really began understanding the gravity of the issue. I still, for a little while, tried to say, well, I don't agree with it, but as long as, it's not bothering me, kind of a boomer mindset, I guess, on that. As long as it's not bothering me, I guess I'm okay with it, right? I guess it's all right. And then it wasn't until I started getting really deep into the study of the sacred scripture, and I realized how important this issue is to God himself, as he calls it an abomination in scripture, because it is a perversion of the natural creation order. It is an absolute rebellion against creation order, which is why it's so serious, which is why it's an abomination. You're looking, when people commit homosexual acts, they are looking in the face of God and slapping him in the face and saying, you're pointing your finger in his face and saying, "I don't like your creation order, so I'm going to do what seems right to do me. I'm going to do what feels right to me." And I didn't realize the gravity of that until I realized the gravity of sin in general, right? Each sin is us pointing our finger in God's face and saying, I don't like what you've asked me to do, and I'm going to do the opposite of it. And it's the same thing with homosexuality, but I think, there are sins that are greater than others, and this is a sin that is greater than a lot of sins because it attacks the very foundation on which society and the creation order is set upon.
Good stuff. I would say looking at all that stuff in the past, and especially from looking at from your story and looking at all the things that have been going on, it's just kind of what the Bible's been predicting for such a long time. Because you were talking about Leviticus, talking about things that are abomination, which is a man can't lay with a man, or looking at Romans, I believe in the first chapter, where Paul is predicting that in the future there's going to be men that will dress like women and women that will dress like men. Just all the sin that's all coming together over time. It's just becoming such a big problem. Now, as Christian men, it is really important that whatever household we're in, either we're still the son of a father in a household, or we're currently tending to our own sons and daughters, or tending to our wives. It's really important that we keep all sin out of the house, whatever it takes. And so comes to that temptation where we make things a little bit more comfortable, and it could be just simple things like watching a kids show, or just looking on stuff on Instagram. It's not a big deal, but after a while, those things do start to add up. Those things start to spread like weeds, and eventually you become more comfortable with it, which is the game of the LGBT community. Their entire goal is to make sure everyone is okay with it. Everyone is on board with it, especially with people that are heterosexual, because their entire game, they realize that they can't multiply on their own. They are against God's plan. They know the way that they go, they will be extinct over time. So their entire mission, or at least what Satan is searching for them to do, is to go to everyone, especially people that are multiplying, and take away their children to make them a part of their cult. That is their entire idea of trying to make a whole community so their community will never die on this earth. And so as a Christian, you either go into these two categories, where you can either be very hateful, very arrogant towards them, try to go over there, which a lot of people justify because they're trying to do the right thing, or you look into the right way where scriptures is trying to head to, which is being loving towards those people, but also making sure you do put a wall between them and you spiritually, making sure that you tell them that I don't support this. I will not be a part of this. I love you as a brother, and I will pray for you. I will pray that you go to repentance to God, just like I do to myself every single day. But I will not support this terrible cult that you're in. And it's a very hard balance, because even if you're trying to do the right thing, what the Bible is trying to tell you, the LGBT community, despite them saying that we're loving, we're accepting to everyone, the second when Christians start questioning their motives and their religion or culture, that's when they get very arrogant towards Christians. And especially Christians, I would say, is the most attacked out of all the other communities that are fighting the LGBT community right now, because God specifically teaches us to pray for our enemies, not to attack them, but to pray for them. And that's a very big difficulty. Any time in your lives where you have a difficult situation where you need to avoid this part of the LGBT community and you're being attacked, do you have a time in your life when that happened?
Repeat the question right quick.
Right. Sorry about that. I was rambling. Is there a time is there a time in your life where you were in a situation of encountering the LGBT community and you find it difficult to interact with them because of how either hateful or arrogant they were?
Well, yes, and actually I'll give an example. And this instance occurred when I was living in Texas, and I was down at a Southern Baptist church still down in Texas before I learned to read and became reformed. So there was a individual, actually several individuals, at the church that I was attending in Southern Baptist, who were quite liberal. And when I say quite liberal, I mean very liberal. And I still follow this particular individual on Instagram, and like almost every day, it is something liberal, something attacking the conservative position. And he wasn't. I'm trying to be very touchy on the issue, but he wasn't homosexual himself, but he was very defensive of those who were and part of the LGBT community, and believed that they should be accepted in the Christian community and by the Southern Baptist Convention and every denomination. And I tried to speak to him on why I'm sorry, but I'm not going to see if I'm a pastor and I have a man come in my church who's gay. Can he come to the church? Yes. Those who are sick need a doctor. But if he is unrepentant of that sin and attempts to join my church, for example, is he going to be allowed? Am I going to allow that? No. Because he cannot be a member in good standing while still in unrepentant sin. So this individual that I'm speaking of, who I had many conversations with on this issue, dismissed, and this is what they'll do a lot of times, especially if they're trying to get Christians, specifically Christians, to accept their lifestyle. They'll use some of the talking points of like, well, the Christian church has such a long history of persecuting us. So who are you? It's our time. You have been persecuting us long enough, so it's our time to do something. And any objection you make to the lifestyle, any objection I made to the lifestyle with this person was always come back. This person would always come back with, well, Christians have been abusing the homosexual community long enough, and this hateful rhetoric that you are espousing is the very reason why these people have been persecuted for so long. So you should just really shut your mouth, because the Bible needs to move with the times, the church needs to move with the times, and the times demand this position. And if you go against this position, you are in league with anyone who would, kill homosexuals. So they tend to use that argument, or they'll try to say they try to use guilty by association. You don't agree with homosexuality, so now you're in association with people who hated homosexuals and killed homosexuals, right? They always they won't attack, or they won't respond to your criticisms of their lifestyle or their ideology, because they have no response to the criticisms, because the ideology of LGBTQ is built on sand. There is no response. They have no response. So the only response they have is to attack you, attack your character, to associate you with all sorts of ungodly individuals. So that's just a personal experience I have there. I did, when I was in public school, before I kind of just softened my position to get by, I did stand against it for a time. And I was bullied for that. I was mocked for it, because they would often say, you got a backwards belief. You're stuck in centuries past. This is a new era. We're so much more enlightened now, you see. You need to get with the times. So those are two experiences I've had with it. One where I'm just kind of berated and associated with terrorists, essentially, and then another where it's just, you need to get with the times. You get enlightened. Stop being so stuck on the Bible. And you can't get anywhere with them because they're so arrogant, because they assume that their position is correct. And a lot of them, they're the type of people that if you told them the sky was blue, they'd swear it's red, right? You can't get anywhere with that. It's like talking to a brick wall.
Yeah, exactly. And like what you said before, a lot of their ideologies is impossible to protect or defend, especially with, you're talking a little bit about homosexuality and how God has created our earth. That just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit. A man and man can't be with each other. A woman and woman can't be with each other. And also you could also look at that theologically. You can also look at it scientifically, because it's scientifically proven when people from the same gender are with each other, they don't last as long as a couple who are man and wife, because of their diseases and the infections that are caused during those kind of marriages. People are statistically not prone to last that long in those kind of marriage. Same with trans people, when that's another big issue, arguably probably even bigger than people that are trying to normalize homosexuality. You have people that are chopping their limbs off. They're chopping parts of their bodies off for to just feel somewhat better about themselves, saying that they're not really what they are. And it's not only just men and women that are going on, but they're encouraging young children to be taking things like hormone blockers, which is damaging to their bodies and irreversible once that stuff happens. And it's just terrible to see, which I'm really trying hard to communicate with people that agree with that stuff, to at least come to the point where, well, first of all, make it clear that none of it's okay. I don't think anyone should, at any age, should be doing that at all. I believe it's a sin, but I'd really fight forward to talk to those people about at least consider to have these people make a regulation of people that can take it, like make it a rule where like only 18 or 21-year-olds can take those hormone blockers. Let those kids not let those kids decide for themselves, because they're too young to make those decisions for themselves. Because you have those people in those communities that say, yes, kids shouldn't smoke cigarettes, they shouldn't put tattoos on their body, they shouldn't be driving, they shouldn't be drinking, all these different things. But once they say, Dad, I think I'm a girl, not a boy, that makes it okay to take some kind of drug that's irreversible to their bodies and can't be fixed ever again, which is terrible. Which I argue is that it's such a dangerous thing, because once you have all those people that are taking that, it's going to be disaster. We're going to have a pandemic of people getting sick from it. Our generation is the guinea pigs for those experiments. And I pray to God this isn't the case, but I mean, 20 or 30 years from now, we could have a bunch of people that are getting really sick because they have parts of their bodies that are chopped off. They have very bad drugs that were in their bodies throughout their entire life that will put a max out on their life. It's very sad, which is extremely hard, especially for those people that accept it, because a lot of times those people that accept those kind of ideologies, they're very emotional, they're not very logical, so that makes it even more difficult to talk to those people. But in the end, it's not only wrong in the sight of the eyes of the Lord, but also it's just not safe for people. So what I am encouraging people that watch this podcast or they see these kind of ideologies is to steer clear from it, because it's just it's going to be the end of you. It's going to be sickening to yourself, the entire body, and then it's not going to help you get into the right eyes of the Lord as well. It's just a wrongdoing all the way through.
Yeah, that is correct, and I agree with you that we're going to see people, having serious health issues with this, and we're already seeing it. I mean, it's going to happen. I think part of the good news, though, is that you see our generation being the generation that's starting to put a little pushback on that. So hold up, I think a lot of us realize we were sold a bill of goods growing up and in school. We were sold a bill of goods. It didn't work, which is why so many Gen Z young men, not many. I mean, some Gen Z young women, but not the greatest number. We're going to experience massive population decline because of the ideological split between Gen Z young men and Gen Z young women. But that's a talk for another time. But Gen Z young men are looking to Christianity a lot because of this ideology surrounding liberalism and transgenderism and LGBTQ. So I think that is a good sign, though. Our generation has become the generation that's starting to push back on this. In fact, if you look at polling among Republican Party voters, now I know this isn't necessarily a metric to engraft all of Gen Z, but the Republican Party in 2023, 55% of registered Republicans supported homosexuality. That number has dwindled to 41%, as a lot of Gen Z young men have started registering as Republicans. And because of that, the scales that it seemed like, the Republican Party is just going to end up accepting homosexuality, the scales are now flipped the other way, and support has, flipped all the way down. I mean, that's a 14% drop in 2 years. 2 years. So I think that's a really good sign, and I think that it'll continue. I think it'll continue to go up among registered Democrats, but I think as more Gen Z young men become more conservative, I think support for homosexuality and transgenderism, by extent, will continue to go down.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely would see I definitely have seen in the last 2 or 3 years a big explosion of young men that are wanting to at least become conservative, but also a lot of young men that are wanting to go away from the progressiveness of Christianity, the people that claim to be the right churches, but are only wolves disguised as sheep. I think they are walking away from that, which is very encouraging as well. Now that we're talking about church and also different parts of progressiveness and Christianity, I wanted to talk a little bit of how we were talking a little bit about how young men deal with these kind of things throughout culture and modern society. But also, I wanted to talk a little bit about how specifically young Christian men should handle this kind of stuff within the church, because you have some circumstances where you're in a conservative church and they're preaching the true gospel, and you have this situation of these people coming to you. And I mean, that's a little bit easier because if it's a good, healthy, conservative church, you're able to talk to these people, have good conversations if they do so, and you can start helping them see the light. However, there's a lot of churches that are starting to be overcome with progressiveness, and they're starting to be more welcoming with these things, like ordaining women as pastors, or being more welcome with things like homosexuality and transgenderism, or even pedophilia, which is that's a big problem as well. And that's also going to be difficult to do because a lot of people that aren't in the Christian faith, or people that are in the LGBT community, they will attack us saying all these different churches are different. They're not all united, and some churches, they're good. We're all welcoming to these things. That's going to be a very difficult task. So I wanted to talk about what's the best way to encounter these kind of things if your church happens to start being more welcoming with liberal ideas, or if your church has been overflowing with all of this and it needs to be a big problem. What's the best way to combat this, and the best way to put the light of Christ into those churches?
Well, I would say, like, specifically in the Presbyterian Church, which PCUSA has a lot of these issues, right? It's all over the internet. You see, there's a lot of faithful conservative pastors in the PCUSA, but there is a lot of liberalism. So I would say, if you're a church member, and specifically, this is probably more of a problem in the main lines. So I would say, the PCUSA, ELCA, Episcopal Church, the Southern Baptist Convention, I would count as mainline. I'm sorry, Richard Ackerman's going to shoot me for that. LCMS as well. So when you see these problems pop up, specifically, let me talk into the context of the Presbyterian Church, because it's where I'd understand, and the Southern Baptist Convention. In the PCUSA, you need to be electing lay elders who are conservative in their theology. And that requires members to show up to church meetings, to church business meetings where they're voting on things, right? So the problem here is the liberals show up to every single dadgum meeting. The liberals show up to every business meeting, to every general assembly, to every convention. They're always there because their goal is to corrupt and seduce an institution from the right, or from traditional conservative theology, to the left, to theological liberalism. That is their whole goal. So they'll show up to every meeting, every single one, even if there's nothing to vote on, because they want to push their agenda. Conservatives, what we tend to do is we don't show up to half of anything. The Southern Baptist Convention, I'll use it as an example. From the years of 1979 onwards into the 1990s were the years of the conservative resurgence of the Southern Baptist Convention. And the reason that the Southern Baptist Convention was allowed to go liberal in the first place was because people weren't showing up. Only the liberals were coming, so they elected a succession of liberal Southern Baptist presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention. And only then, once the light was shone on it, they finally convinced some more conservative churches to send messengers to the convention. They elected a man by the name of Adrian Rogers in 1979 to be the first conservative SBC president in a while. And this began the conservative resurgence. Now, the SBC has it was over here. Now it's been dragged over here. Now what happened? Because what happened was what has happened is the SBC is drifting back over here again. And from the outside, a lot of people don't realize it, But from the inside, someone who's been on the inside, I have realized it. It is drifting back over here. Why? Well, part of the problem is because the conservative Southern Baptist, Adrian Rogers, Paul Pressler, golly, what's his name? I forget his name. He was president of Southwestern for a time. I forget, Southwestern Baptist Seminary. Paige Patterson. Part of the reason is they were like, it was like a dog chasing a fire truck. And once you finally catch the fire truck, what do you do with it? So the conservatives were chasing the SBC around, and finally they got it, and now they were like, okay, what do we do with it? So that's part of the problem, yes. But I think that's not even the main problem. The main problem was in 2000, when the Baptist Faith and Message was set out, they thought that it was done then. And that hand slipped off the steering wheel. Well, when you take your hand off the steering wheel of a car, what's going to happen to the car? It's going to drift one way or the other. And in terms of denominational politics, more than likely, it's going to drift to the left. So what's happening now is you have a lot of conservative Southern Baptists who are realizing, oh, shoot, what have we done? And now they're scrambling to reach back for the wheel to pull it back over here. And it's the same thing in the PCUSA. Conservatives just stopped showing up to General Assembly, and they took their hands off the wheel. Theological liberalism kind of moved itself in Princeton Seminary and the rest of the PCUSA. Conservatives stopped going. Conservatives stopped going to meetings. So once you let the hand off the steering wheel, it's going to drift to the left, which is what happened to the PCUSA. And whenever conservatives in the PCUSA have been like, oh, shoot, let me try to grab the steering wheel and pull it back over here, it's always been too late. Right? Same with the homosexuality thing. When the PCUSA voted to affirm homosexuality, a few conservatives were like, oh, wait, let me grab the steering wheel real quick. There are too few of them, and it happened too late. Right? So, and then most of them who were in the fight, what really I think killed the PCUSA for a while, conservatives in the PCUSA for a while, was the fact that after the women's ordination thing, a lot of the churches left. But even before that, before the merger of the PCUS, the Southern Presbyterian Church and the Northern Presbyterian Church, a lot of conservatives left and formed the PCA, and that was for several reasons, including segregation, but including the Southern Presbyterian Church's opposition to segregation. But conservatives stopped showing up to meetings, and they ran away from the fight. So if you're in a church that is espousing liberalism, or now the hand is being taken off the steering wheel and it's drifting liberal, for God's sake, grab the steering wheel. Go to the meetings. Go to church meetings, to presbytery meetings, to general assemblies. If you're in a congregationalist context, go to your local state convention, your national convention or meeting of your denomination. Do these things. Grab the steering wheel and yank the thing right. Okay? You need to go to the meetings, because I guarantee you, PCUSA, for example, the PCUSA pretty overwhelmingly voted for Trump in the 2024 election. Okay, that shows something. The laymen are very conservative, but the conservative laymen just don't go to the meetings like the liberals do. If you would just go to the meetings, I promise you, we would outnumber them.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot about why I wanted to start this podcast, because not just looking through a lot of the problems that are going through June, but how to solve all of these problems within the church is really through the layman and the leadership that goes through it. And I always look at it that way. It's not just the pastor or some of the elders that make the whole foundation of the leadership of the church is through everyone in the congregation that's supporting the true word of Christ. And that's why we need all those people, all those butts in those leadership roles and in those meetings, and being able to make sure if there's weeds, we can pull them out sooner than later, because there's always going to be problems within the church. I would say the LCMS has gotten a small wave of those progressive progressive churches. It's starting to get to a problem where people aren't doing close communion. They're not doing honoring things like the presence of Christ, or starting to be a little bit more welcoming in things like homosexuality, which the LCMS needs to address. I completely agree with you. We do have good leadership, but I'd say we don't have leadership that's aggressive enough to put a stop to those problems. Because you see, every now and then I'll see a professor or a registered LCMS pastor, and they're welcoming things like ordaining women, or things like open communion, or even worse, being all right with things like being okay with kids being trans. And we're not aggressive enough with those problems. And thankfully, statistics aren't always reliable when it comes to the LCMS, because every time I see people put statistics of what people are thinking in the LCMS, it's always like 5 million, 6 million people, which isn't true, because I mean, we're like 2.1 or 1.9 million people in our congregation at the best. So it makes me feel better that there's a lot of those statistics that are including like churches like the ELCA and the LCMS combined as one, which we're not. But it makes me feel a little bit better about how, even though it looks like the statistics of like the LCMS are getting worse, which some parts it is true, but thankfully it hasn't gone overboard with the ELCA, which I think is because there's still a lot of Lutheran pastors that are still confessional to the Book of Concord and to the Word of God, that are leading people of all different generations, especially young men, that which you're preaching, which is totally correct, of young men that are becoming more conservative, that are becoming more encouraged to go to those leadership roles, are becoming laymen of the church, and are preaching the word, making sure that stuff isn't being preached, or not letting evil being preached at the church. It's getting a lot better. I'm hoping the LCMS can turn around, because the last thing I would want it is to be just another ELCA synod. So praying for that to get better, also for the PCU. That's pretty much all I have today. I think we pretty much got everything. We talked about homosexuality, trans rights, and leadership of the church. That's basically it. So Isaiah, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's my pleasure. I hope to come on again soon.